It's been nearly a decade and a half since the release of Elder Scrolls Skyrim. And yet, here we are, still playing it, still modding it, still quoting it, and in some cases, still buying it. Originally released in 2011, Skyrim quickly became one of the most influential open-world games of all time. Its massive, atmospheric world, flexible RPG systems, and sense of freedom helped define an entire generation of gaming, and shaped how we think about modern open-world design. But what is it that gives Skyrim this kind of staying power? Why is it still relevant in 2025 when most of its peers have faded into nostalgia? In this video, we're taking a comprehensive, honest look at Skyrim, not just as a game, but as a phenomenon. We'll explore what made it work, what hasn't aged well, how the modding community has completely transformed it, and why it continues to thrive long after its original release. Whether you're revisiting it for the 100th time or looking at it for the first, this is Skyrim, re-examined. To understand Skyrim, why it plays the way it does, why it still resonates with so many, you have to look at where it came from. Because Skyrim wasn't just a hit, it was the culmination of nearly 2 decades of iteration, ambition, and occasionally chaos. Bethesda Softworks was founded in 1986 by Christopher Weaver, originally as a division of a media company. It wasn't built for fantasy RPGs, at least not at first. Their early successes included sports titles like Gridiron, and even licensed projects including The Terminator for DOS. But in 1994, something changed. Bethesda released The Elder Scrolls Arena, an ambitious, sprawling first-person RPG that promised an entire continent to explore. It was rough, buggy, and deeply flawed, but it laid the foundation for everything that would come after. Arena was followed by Daggerfall in 1996, a game that remains infamous for its scale. Its map was procedurally generated, boasting over 15,000 locations, hundreds of towns, and the ability to customize spells, skills, and even political allegiances. But Daggerfall was also a technical mess. Bugs were rampant, quests often broke, and even installing the game was a challenge for many players. Bethesda nearly collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. The studio regrouped. In 2002, Morrowind marked a shift, a handcrafted world, denser design, and a distinct alien atmosphere that set it apart from other fantasy RPGs. For many, Morrowind is where the Elder Scrolls truly found its voice. Then came Oblivion in 2006, the first Elder Scrolls game designed with consoles in mind. It introduced voice acting, radiant AI, and more accessible mechanics. It was also the first major title under the creative leadership of one man, Todd Howard. Todd Howard joined Bethesda in the mid-90s as a designer and quickly rose through the ranks. By the time of Morrowind, he was a lead designer. By Oblivion, he was directing the series. Howard became the face of Elder Scrolls, a passionate believer in player freedom, emergent gameplay, and big, bold ideas. His vision helped shape not just how the games looked and felt, but how they were sold to the public. He's also a controversial figure. For some, he's the visionary who brought RPGs to the mainstream. For others, he's the man behind a string of overpromises and underwhelming follow-throughs. But love him or not, there's no denying his impact. Development on Skyrim began shortly after the release of Oblivion, with a small team quietly prototyping new systems and tools as Bethesda wrapped up its work on Fallout 3. Official development began in 2008, with a core team of around 100 people, using a brand new engine they called the Creation Engine, a heavily modified version of Gamebryo, used in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Fallout 3. The goal? To make an RPG that combined the best elements of Bethesda's past work, the freedom of Morrowind, the accessibility of Oblivion, and the emergent gameplay of Fallout 3, and wrap it in a more polished, cinematic package. Skyrim's development took about 3.5 years, a relatively short timeline for a game of its scale. During that time, the team rewrote major systems, overhauling animation, AI, quest scripting, and even the way world assets were streamed into memory. The game also introduced dragons, a major technical and design hurdle that took over a year to properly implement. The design philosophy that shaped Skyrim was simple: minimize friction, maximize possibility. Remove anything that slows the player down, class selection, stat distribution, pre-built roles, and instead create a world that reacts to whatever the player wants to do. This led to systems that were easy to learn but hard to master. Want to be a battle mage who wears heavy armor and shoots fireballs? You can. Want to sneak around in the woods using alchemy to poison your arrows? That's valid too. The game doesn't stop you, it adapts. But this also meant sacrificing depth for accessibility. Gone were the deep spell customization systems of Morrowind. Stats like intelligence, willpower, and speed were stripped out in favor of streamlined skills and perk trees. Some called it evolution, others simplification. Combat was redesigned to feel more visceral. Weapons had more weight, and dual wielding allowed for new combinations. Magic became flashier, though less flexible, and stealth, while still exploitable, was refined to be more intuitive and satisfying. Leveling was based entirely on use, a system where you improved by doing. Fight more with swords, your one-handed skill improves. Get caught picking locks, your sneak goes up. It was organic, rewarding experimentation, but also easy to min-max if you understood the system. Quests were built using the new Radiant system, a tool that allowed NPCs to dramatically assign tasks based on the player's location or choices. This helped populate the world with repeatable, context-aware content, but it also led to some of the game's more repetitive moments. Skyrim is a product of careful compromise. It was designed to be massive, but manageable. Flexible, but approachable. It pushed the boundaries of open-world design in 2011, but also played it safe in certain areas. Dialogue, AI, and long-term consequences were often simplified. And yet, it worked. Skyrim launched on November 11, 2011, to massive critical and commercial success. It became more than a game. It became a template, not just for Bethesda, but for the open-world genre at large. There's a moment most Skyrim players remember, and it doesn't involve dragons or shouting enemies off cliffs. It's a quiet moment. Maybe it's the first time you see the aurora borealis over the snowy plains of the Pale. Maybe it's standing under the golden trees of the Rift as wind rustles through the leaves. Or maybe it's just walking alone, with nothing but the sound of your footsteps and distant thunder. This is where Skyrim shines. A huge part of that immersion comes from its audio design. Jeremy Soul's score is haunting, restrained, and often melancholy. It doesn't demand your attention, it waits. A soft piano chord as you crest a hill, a slow string swell in the stillness of a dungeon. The ambient soundscape fills in the gaps, distant wolves howling, birds chirping in the forests, rain tapping on your helmet, and the iconic soundtrack. It becomes invisible, blending so seamlessly with the world that you often don't notice it's there, until you do. Skyrim's visual atmosphere is more than just snowy mountains and cold color palettes. Each region has its own distinct mood. The foggy marshes of Yalmark feel heavy and unsettling, while the orange gold of the Rift feels strangely nostalgic. Lighting plays a big role here too, the way torches flicker in dark caves, or how moonlight spills over a frozen lake. These moments build tone without dialogue or plot. And then there's the world itself, filled with quiet stories that happen whether or not you're there. A cabin in the woods with a locked cellar and a journal inside. A shrine destroyed by bandits. A cave full of Falmer ruins and scattered bones. These aren't just set pieces, they're micro-stories, fragments of lives that hint at a larger world just beneath the surface. And most players won't find all of them, but that's the point. Immersion also relies on how the world reacts to you. Bethesda tried to improve this with their Radiant AI system, giving NPCs daily routines, jobs, sleep schedules, and dynamic responses to player actions. At its best, it works. Shopkeepers sweep their storefronts, guards chat about dragons, and kids run through the streets. You can follow an NPC from dawn to dusk and see how they live their life. But at its worst, the cracks show. Dialogue repeats constantly, characters get stuck on paths, and everyone, somehow, is willing to forgive you after you commit grand larceny, if you just pay a fine. Still, the illusion holds, just enough, because the world feels alive in small, ambient ways, not because it reacts perfectly, but because it reacts at all. It's ironic, in a way. Some of Skyrim's most immersive moments come because of its flaws. The jank, the bugs, the weird physics glitches, they create stories you couldn't script. A giant launches you into orbit. A dragon spawns upside down. A guard is calmly talking about arrows while standing in the middle of a vampire attack. These moments break the fourth wall, sure, but they also become a part of the shared cultural memory of Skyrim, part of what makes it feel lived in. Imperfect, but memorable. Skyrim's immersion isn't about realism, it's about consistency. Mood, texture, it's the wind, the music, the sky, the pacing. A world that doesn't rush you. A world that says, take your time. There's no wrong way to play. And that atmosphere, more than dragons, more than combat or quests, is what keeps people coming back, year after year. If there's one reason Skyrim is still being played today and re-released year after year, it's not just the dragons, it's the mods. Since day one, modders have rebuilt, retextured, redesigned, and reimagined every inch of this game. In fact, Skyrim may be the most heavily modded single-player game of all time, with well over 100,000 mods uploaded to major platforms like Nexus Mods, ModDB, and Steam Workshop. The Elder Scrolls has always had a relationship with modding. Morrowind shipped with its own editor, encouraging players to add new characters, weapons, and even towns. Oblivion expanded on that, and the modders responded by creating full overhauls of combat, magic, and leveling. But Skyrim? Skyrim turned modding into an ecosystem, one that not only changed the game, but often surpassed what Bethesda originally built. Bethesda officially supported modding by releasing the Creation Kit, the same toolset used by their own developers. It gave players direct access to the game's world, logic systems, dialogue trees, item databases, and even AI behavior scripting. And it worked. Within days of Skyrim's launch, players were uploading tweaks, bug fixes, and new armor sets. Within weeks, entire towns, questlines, and gameplay systems started appearing. And within a year, the Skyrim you bought at launch could look and play completely different. Mods come in all sizes. Some are simple, high-resolution textures, improved UI, better lighting. Others are game-changing, like complete weather systems, new combat engines, or AI overhauls. Then there are the total conversions, entire new lands with original characters, stories, and mechanics. Mods like Enderall, Falskar, and Wormstooth added dozens of hours of content, often rivaling the quality of the base game itself. Some modders spent years crafting their vision, and for a few, those mods became stepping stones into professional game development careers. A few names come up over and over again in the modding scene. Here are just a few that left a mark. Sky UI. This is a complete overhaul of the clunky console-based interface, optimized for PC players. The unofficial Skyrim patch, a legendary bug-fixing mod that corrected hundreds of glitches Bethesda never officially addressed. The alternate start, live another life. This is a mod that lets you bypass Helgen and begin the game as a beggar, a vampire, a shipwreck survivor, and more, completely changing your role-playing experience. And then we have SKSE, also known as Skyrim Script Extender. It's not a mod itself, but a foundational tool that allows more complex mods to function at all. Then we have things like Immersive Citizens, Realistic Needs, Frostfall, Ordinator, and Wildcat Combat. These are mods that rework survival mechanics, AI behavior, combat, and progression to make the game far more demanding and rewarding. In 2015, Bethesda and Valve launched a paid mod program on Steam. It didn't go well. The idea was to let modders sell their work, a form of compensation for what was essentially unpaid labor. But the rollout was poorly handled, with unclear revenue splits, no quality control, and concerns over stolen or plagiarized content. After major backlash, the program was pulled within a week. But Bethesda didn't drop the idea. Years later, they introduced the Creation Club, a curated set of paid mods, integrated directly into the game. Reception was mixed. Some praised the polish, others saw it as an attempt to monetize a community that had thrived on passion and openness. Today, modding isn't just an option. For many players, it's the way Skyrim is meant to be played. There are entire YouTube channels, Discord communities, and wikis dedicated solely to modding tutorials and curated load orders. Some players never play vanilla at all. They play custom versions of Skyrim tailored to their tastes. Survival-focused, horror-themed, ultra-realistic, or lore-rich. It's not just a game, it's a platform. And as long as the modding community stays active, Skyrim won't die, because someone, somewhere, is always making it better. Skyrim wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. When it launched on November 11th, 2011, it sold over 7 million copies in the first week. It was nominated for, and won, multiple Game of the Year awards. And in the years since, it has become one of the best-selling games of all time, with over 60 million copies sold as of 2023. But Skyrim's legacy isn't just about numbers. It's about reach. How this one game seeped into pop culture, influenced a generation of developers, and changed how we think about open-world RPGs. For many, Skyrim was their first RPG. It was accessible, available on consoles, and deeply replayable. You could lose hundreds of hours in its world without ever touching the main story. Its release lined up with the explosion of YouTube and Twitch, spawning countless Let's Plays, mod showcases, and meme compilations. And suddenly, everyone knew what a Fus Ro Dah was. Even people who never played Skyrim can probably recognize its music, its UI, or that one guard who used to be an adventurer too, before he took an arrow to the knee. Skyrim's memetic power can't be overstated. It became the default example for open-world games, the butt of countless jokes, and the kind of shared language for gamers worldwide. It's been ported to nearly every platform imaginable: PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, VR, even Alexa. Todd Howard famously said, "If you want us to stop releasing it, stop buying it." And of course, people kept buying it. The game's quirks, the bugs, the cheese wheels, the stealth archers, the talking dog, the backwards flying dragons, these all became beloved, not resented. This game's identity is as much about the unintended moments as it is about the epic ones. Skyrim, of course, had a huge influence on the gaming industry. It didn't just dominate, it shaped the future of RPGs. Other studios took notice. Open-world design became the gold standard. Games like The Witcher 3, Dragon Age Inquisition, Horizon Zero Dawn, and even Breath of the Wild all bear traces of Skyrim's DNA, whether in their exploration, quest structures, or emergent gameplay. Even developers outside of the RPG space started building more reactive worlds because players expected it. And of course, modding became a serious feature. What used to be an afterthought was now a selling point, with companies like CD Projekt Red and Larian Studios offering full toolsets for players to customize their experiences, inspired by the Skyrim modding scene. Skyrim's massive shadow also created a strange problem. It was too successful. For over a decade, Bethesda leaned heavily on Skyrim, re-releasing it, remastering it, and turning it into a platform for mods, community creations, and meme marketing. Meanwhile, fans waited, and waited. The next Elder Scrolls game, teased in 2018 with a single mountain range, has remained elusive. Instead, Bethesda launched Fallout 4, then Fallout 76, then Starfield. Each game carried the weight of Skyrim's legacy, and for better or worse, none quite escaped it. Skyrim wasn't perfect. Its story was serviceable, its AI could be broken, its mechanics often shallow. But it felt like an epic, even if you spent most of your time stealing sweet rolls and shouting goats off of cliffs. It gave players something rare, a world that didn't just react to them, it invited them to wander, to experiment, to imagine. And that's the real legacy of Skyrim. Not just a great RPG, not just a commercial success, but a cultural moment, one that people are still playing, still modding, still quoting, and still dreaming about over a decade later. After all these years, through the memes, the mods, and the millions of hours poured into crafting custom worlds, it's easy to forget that Skyrim shipped with something else. A story. Not just a setting or a sandbox, a structured narrative, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yet for many players, it's the last thing they think about, the main quest. That ancient tale of dragons, destiny, and prophecy exists, but for a lot of us, it was just one more marker on the map. One more thing to do between crafting potions or hunting elk. So let's change that. Let's look back at what Skyrim actually tells us, through its main story, its side quests, and its tangled web of factions. Skyrim opens with chaos. You, nameless and bound, carted off to execution beside Ulfric Stormcloak, the man accused of murdering a High King with the power of the voice. And just when you're about to be beheaded, a dragon attacks, the first one seen in centuries, Alduin, the World Eater. It's a strong start, and soon after, you're told something even stranger. You're a Dragonborn, a mortal with the blood and soul of a dragon, able to absorb their power and use their language, the Thu'um. On paper, it's a classic Chosen One narrative. Prophecies, ancient tombs, elder scrolls, you are the hero the world needs. And yet, something about Skyrim's main quest feels optional, not just by design, but in tone. You can ignore Alduin for hundreds of hours and the world won't care. There's no urgency, no spreading fear of dragons laying waste to cities. You can get married, build a house, and fish in a river while the apocalypse idles politely in the background. That doesn't mean the story lacks meaning. It has its moments, especially when you climb the 7,000 steps to High Hrothgar, stand on the throat of the world, or speak with Paarthurnax, the dragon who turned away from his violent nature. That conversation alone, about change, free will, and regret, might be the most thoughtful moment in the entire game. But the rest? It's uneven. Delphine and the Blades are forgettable. The Elder Scrolls segment feels disconnected, and Alduin, for all his power, lacks real presence. He's more of a threat in theory than in gameplay. Most dragon fights become routine within hours. Nonetheless, the main quest accomplishes something important. It connects you to the world's mythology. It makes you feel of Skyrim, not just in it. And for all its pacing issues, it gives the game a spine, a sense of ancient weight pressing down on a changing world. But where Skyrim truly shines is not in the fate of the world, but in the lives of its people. In this next section, I want to take a more in-depth look at the various factions and allegiances. The side quests, especially the well-written, self-contained ones, are where the game's heart beats strongest. They're scattered across the map like secrets waiting to be discovered, and sometimes they're more impactful than any prophecy. There's the haunted house in Markarth, where a Daedric prince whispers in your ear. The lighthouse in the north, where a family disappears under mysterious circumstances. The dark tale of Frostflow Abyss. The murder mystery in Windhelm. The bizarre, surreal journey through Sheogorath's mind in the Shivering Isles-inspired quest, The Mind of Madness. These aren't grand narratives, they're bite-sized folklore, and in many ways they embody what Skyrim does best, give you a sense of place, people, and myth in just a few lines of dialogue or a twisted cave layout. Skyrim doesn't force these stories on you. You stumble into them, or miss them entirely, and that's why they feel real. Beyond the personal tales and Daedric weirdness, Skyrim offers 4 major faction storylines, each tied to a specific archetype: the warrior, the mage, the thief, and the assassin. Arguably the most iconic faction, the Dark Brotherhood delivers one of the strongest questlines in the game. From the moment you're kidnapped in the night by Astrid, to the slow unraveling of the Brotherhood's internal rot, to assassinating the Emperor himself, it's rich with tension, character, and consequence. It's bloody, it's theatrical, and it's a perfect fit for players who want to play the monster, or at least pretend to. And then we have the Thieves Guild. Set in the decaying city of Riften, the Thieves Guild starts with petty crime and builds towards the restoration of a criminal empire. It's not as emotionally powerful as the Brotherhood arc, but it has atmosphere, shadowy taverns, betrayals, and the sense that you're clawing your way back into relevance. The Nightingales and Nocturnal storyline adds a mystical element that not everyone loves, but it gives the guild a unique identity beyond just pickpocketing and lockpicking. Our third faction is the College of Winterhold. This should have been the game's deepest, most arcane storyline, but it ends up feeling rushed. The College of Winterhold, Skyrim's version of a mage's university, is a cool location, but the questline barely scratches the surface of magic's dangers, philosophy, or history. Still, the sense of becoming Archmage, wielding forbidden power, and exploring ancient ruins offers enough of a fantasy hook to keep it memorable, if undercooked. And finally, the Companions. Skyrim's take on a warrior guild begins grounded, focused on honor and martial tradition, before it pivots into werewolf lore. The transformation into a beast is fun, but the story feels thin compared to the Brotherhood or even the Thieves Guild. Still, it's another window into the world, one shaped by old Nordic values, of familial loyalty and blood rights. In this next section, we'll take a look at the Civil War questline. Alongside the personal and faction stories, Skyrim weaves in a more political tale, the civil war between the Empire and the rebellious Stormcloaks. You can join either side, fighting in sieges, claiming forts, and crowning a new ruler of Skyrim. But like many things in Skyrim, the idea is more compelling than the execution. Battles feel underwhelming, choices lack long-term impact, and the world doesn't really change, even after victory. Still, the war adds texture. It forces you to pick a side, to think about identity, loyalty, and what it means to be a true Nord. And it echoes the deeper themes of the game: old powers fading, new powers rising, and the uncertainty of the future. Skyrim's story isn't linear, it's a quilt, stitched together by whatever threads you pull. You might become a werewolf archmage assassin who fights for the Empire, or a pacifist alchemist who refuses to kill. The game doesn't stop you. It barely even acknowledges the contradictions, and that's okay. Because Skyrim isn't about consistency, it's about possibility. It's about the stories you tell yourself, in your head, your journal, or your YouTube playthrough. Its narrative may not be groundbreaking. Its writing, at times, is simplistic, but it gives you the tools to build a character, not just a combat build, but a life, a role, a legend. And that's the story of Skyrim. Not what Bethesda wrote, but what you carved into the stone of the world. As we've seen, the world of Skyrim offers no shortage of stories, from ancient dragon prophecies to tangled faction politics. You can climb the throat of the world, assassinate an emperor, or become the archmage of a shattered college. But if you strip away the quests and the characters, what remains is perhaps Skyrim's most enduring narrative: the land itself. This is a nation carved from frost and flame, divided into 9 holds, each with its own capital, culture, and scars. And it's these places, these cities and keeps, that give Skyrim its soul. So let's leave the beaten path and wander for a while, not as the Dragonborn, not as a savior or a hero, just as a traveler, passing through a land older than the Empire, listening to the stones, the snow, and the silence. We begin in the center of it all, Whiterun, the first city most of us saw, nestled in the vast tundra like a campfire in the cold. Built on trade and tradition, Whiterun is the hold of old ways and open plains. Its capital, also called Whiterun, rises from the earth like a Nordic longship, with Dragon's Reach perched above, aimed skyward as if still waiting for its next captive. This is where Jarl Balgruuf rules, a man caught between the pole of empire and rebellion. Neither radical nor complacent, his kingdom stands on the edge, politically, geographically, and spiritually. To the west, the plains stretch to the Reach. To the east, the road leads to Windhelm and Civil War. And yet, in the quiet, between mammoth bones and tundra flowers, Whiterun still feels like the beating heart of Skyrim, timeless and steady. Follow the White River northeast, and you'll arrive in Windhelm, the City of Kings, the coldest, oldest, and most defiant of Skyrim's holds. Founded by Ysgramor himself, Windhelm is more fortress than city, carved from grey stone and grief. Its people speak of honor and bloodlines, of a Skyrim for Nords, and only Nords. Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak rules from the Palace of the Kings, and his rebellion echoes from the mountains to the sea. But this place carries more than just revolution. It carries a burden of old hatreds, frozen politics, and the ghosts of a crumbling legacy. Even the snow here feels heavy. To the northwest lies the Pale, a hold that seems forgotten by time. Endless snow, lonely hills, and winds that never sleep. Dawnstar, its capital, is more a village than a city, and yet it hosts a nightmare far greater than its size. A Daedric influence poisons the dreams of its people, as Vaermina's shadow creeps across the coastline. The Jarl, Skald the Elder, clings to the old ways, a true believer in the Stormcloak cause, unwilling to see the future through anything but tradition. The Pale is where Skyrim feels most desolate, where the world begins to blur between life and myth, and the mountains whisper things you're not meant to hear. Head west, and the snow gives ways to jagged cliffs and golden stone. This is the Reach, harsh, beautiful, and soaked in blood. Markarth, its capital, is unlike any other city in Skyrim. Built into the bones of a lost Dwemer stronghold, it's a place of industry, tension, and ancient technology few understand. But beneath its grandeur lies unrest. The Forsworn, the native Reachmen, wage a quiet war for their homeland, cast out by the Nords and branded as savages. And while the Jarl holds court, it's the Silverbloods who truly rule, through mines, money, and manipulation. In the Reach, nothing is as it seems. Every stone hides a secret. Every stream might run red. In the southeast, the forest burned gold with the turn of the seasons. This is the Rift, a hold of beauty and rot. Riften, once a proud trading city, now rots from within. The Thieves Guild controls the underbelly, the Blackbriars control the rest. Power is currency here, and everyone has a price. But outside the city, the Rift remains untouched, a place of autumn trees, hidden shrines, and silent lakes. It's here that the ancient sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood lies buried beneath moss and stone. The Rift is a contradiction, serene on the surface, corrupted at the roots. Far to the north, perched on a crumbling cliff, lies Winterhold, once a thriving port and cultural center, now barely a ghost town. A mysterious catastrophe, known simply as the Great Collapse, dragged most of the city into the Sea of Ghosts. The only structure left standing is the College of Winterhold, a tower of magical knowledge and suspicion. The townsfolk blame the mages say nothing. And the truth, as with most things in Skyrim, is buried under layers of silence and snow. Southwest, where the forest thickens and fog clings to the hills, is Falkreathhold, a place of quiet mourning. The town of Falkreath is best known for its massive graveyard, where the names of soldiers, children, and strangers are etched into stone. Death hangs heavy here, even in the stillness of the pine. It's also home to werewolf lore, Daedric shrines, and the shadowy presence of the Dark Brotherhood. In Falkreath, the line between man and beast is thin, and often crossed. To the northwest lies Solitude, seat of the High King and Skyrim's official capital. Imperial banners flutter from its towers, and soldiers march through its cobbled streets. But even here, power is an illusion. Court politics swirl like mist in the Blue Palace. The Bard's College masks sorrow with song, and beneath the elegance lies the rot of war and espionage. Solitude is a city that believes in itself, which makes it all the more fragile. And finally, we come to Yalmark, a place where the land itself seems unsure whether it's alive or dead. Morthal is a fog-shrouded town surrounded by marshes and bogs. Vampires stir in the night, fires consume houses without a cause, and the Jarl, Idgrod Ravencrone, speaks in riddles and visions. This is where stories come to die, or perhaps where they begin again. The 9 holds of Skyrim are more than background. They are voices, speaking in stone, snow, and silence. Together, they form a fractured realm, one torn between past and future, between blood and prophecy, between who it was and what it might become. To walk through Skyrim is to walk through history, and like all history, it is written in ruins, whispered in taverns, and carried on the wind. Skyrim wasn't the most polished game ever made. It wasn't the deepest RPG, and it certainly wasn't free of flaws. We've all had our share of broken quests, floating mammoths, and AI companions walking headfirst into traps. But it was something else, something harder to measure. Skyrim worked, not just because of its systems or its quests, but because of how it made you feel. At its core, Skyrim was about possibility. The world never told you what you had to be. It just quietly opened its gates and let you find out. That freedom, the real freedom to get lost, to wander off, to make mistakes, it was something special. It wasn't just that Skyrim was big, it was that it trusted you to move through it at your own pace, to find your own meaning. That's why it connected. Not because it was perfect, but because it gave you room to create your own story inside of its world. A canvas with just enough shape to guide you, but enough space to let you dream. And it did it with music, with light, with silence. A sunrise over the tundra, snow crunching under boots, the echo of a distant dragon shout. These weren't just design choices. They were emotional cues, and they linger. For many of us, Skyrim wasn't just a game. It was a moment in time. Maybe it was the first RPG we ever played. Maybe it got us through a hard winter. Maybe we stayed up too late on a school night or came home from work and played until the sun came up. We remember where we were, not just in Tamriel, but in our own lives. And when we think of Skyrim now, we're not just thinking about the game. We're remembering who we were when we played it, who we were becoming, what we were escaping or chasing or healing from. That's what gives it weight. Not the resolution, not the combat mechanics, but the connection to a time, to a feeling, to ourselves. Nostalgia gets talked about like it's just a sentiment, a warm memory, a rose-colored lens, but it's more than that. Nostalgia is memory filtered through meaning. It's our minds returning to something not just because it happened, but because it mattered. That's why certain games stay with us, not because they were objectively better than everything that came after, but because they were there when we needed them. Skyrim, for many, myself included, was that game. A familiar road we could always return to, a place where we had control, when maybe life felt like it was spinning out of it. That's why it still resonates. That's why it still sells. It's not just the world that draws people back. It's the feeling of coming home. You know, there's something powerful about a game that doesn't end. Skyrim doesn't really have a final mission. Even the main quest feels like a chapter, not a conclusion. That's by design. The world doesn't stop when Alduin is gone. It just keeps going. And that's why it still works today. Because it's not a closed story. It's an open door. You can put it down for months, years even, but eventually you'll find yourself reinstalling it. You pick your race, you hear that wagon wheel turning, and just like that, you're back. Don't get me wrong, there will always be bigger games, prettier games, smarter games, but not every game will matter. Skyrim mattered, because it gave us a world where we could lose ourselves, and maybe, in the process, find a little more of ourselves too. Whether we return to it for the first time or the 50th, it still has something to say about wonder, about choice, about what it means to wander without knowing exactly where you're going, but trusting that something will be there when you arrive. Maybe that's what makes Skyrim so timeless. Not the dragons, not the combat, but the sense that in a world full of noise, it gave us space to be quiet, to explore, to exist, and to remember who we were when the sky opened up and the first shout echoed across the mountains. And maybe, when the Elder Scrolls 6 finally arrives, it won't just be a new story. It'll be another road, winding, uncertain, and waiting for us to walk it. Thank you so much for sticking around and making it to this section of the video. This is my first ever YouTube video, so any feedback or support is greatly appreciated. I know this video isn't perfect, but nonetheless, I appreciate your time listening to me ramble. This game will forever have a special place in my heart. I'll never forget the countless times I stayed up until sunrise playing it as a teenager. If you enjoyed the content, feel free to drop a like so that you can help me grow and help others find this video. Thank you all for watching.